Hi guys, this is Michelle with Michelle's Canine Training, and today in this video I want to teach you the early steps for teaching down to a dog. So in the very beginning, we want to primarily use a food lure because even though eventually we will graduate up to leash pressure, we want to use food lures because that will allow us to get them into the position, get them used to doing the motion with as little pressure as possible. So here I have some tricky trainers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure it's in my hand in a way where they'll smell it. They could probably lick at it, but they won't be able to get it unless I release my hand. So we're going to guide her down. Come on, pups. Good. Good. Good girl. Very good. So I'm going to demonstrate that again. All right. Good. So Riley, unfortunately, is a really bad demonstrator for this because she's not necessarily following the treat. She's just going into the motion. All right, come on. Good, good. So even though the process might not look exactly the same, the concept is still the same way. An important thing is to be very patient with this because there will be moments where your dog is licking at the treat constantly. Maybe they have their hind legs up, their front legs are down, and you just want the last bit to go down. So always, if you want, break it into pieces, right? Because if your dog does this, where their hind legs are up but their front legs are down, you could always reward that because that's halfway into the motion. And for some dogs, they won't necessarily easily just go straight into the down. So we want to break it up into pieces for them. So in the beginning, good. Come on, pups. Good. Yeah. Good. 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 So see how right there, she didn't go into the full down. So when she does, all right, good, I give it to her. So you just repeat this process over and over because the more a dog repeats a motion, the more they start to understand, oh, I can piece together what motion you're asking me for, let alone what you're actually wanting, because when you choose to reward, they're learning that certain positions or the actions that they're doing is leading to them getting positive reinforcement. All right, come on, pups. Good. Good. Good girl. Good job. And then eventually, after you've done this repetition a couple times, you will start to use a light bit of leash pressure because it's really important for us to eventually introduce leash pressure and start to use that primarily in training aside from food lures, because eventually we're not going to want to use our hands to guide them around all the time, right? We don't want to have to bend over when we're telling them to down. We want to just be able to do leash pressure down and eventually standing straight, saying the command, and then having them go straight down. All right, so in the very beginning, you could put your hand right next to the leash and make sure you keep the leash fairly short because we want to be able to increase and decrease pressure depending on how the dog is doing and getting them used to feeling that sensation while being asked for the command. Another thing I really want to mention is in the beginning, when you are still getting your dog used to the motion, I would refrain from adding on the command until they are consistently doing it without too much trouble. Because if you're saying sit or down, and if you're taking 10 to 15 seconds to get them into the position, then they're not necessarily going to make that connection with the word because so much time has passed. So have them practice the motion, have them doing it very easily, and once you're able to consistently get it, then I would start adding on the command to the motion. All right. Good. So I want to always make sure that she's in an entire down before I release the treat for her to take. And you also want to make sure the moment she gets into the down, you release it. Timing is very important for stuff like this. So this is pretty much the next step after you have used primarily food lures. I'm using a gentle bit of leash pressure. Good. So I'm making sure she knows that the food is there and that she's mainly focused on the food and not the leash pressure, because we want her first responding primarily to this with a tiny bit of leash pressure before we start adding on just using leash pressure. All right, I'm going to demonstrate one more time. So let me get her standing. All right. Good. Good. Now for the next step. After you've been doing a fair amount of guidance with the treat and your hand, you could begin to just use your hand for the down. And eventually, after a few repetitions of that, we would graduate to using just our foot, because we want the end goal in the future to be for us to be standing without having to do this. So we're going to start using foot pressure, and then eventually you would phase out of it as your dog starts getting the picture more and more. So starting off using my hand. Good girl. Good. All right, we're now going to switch to using foot guidance. Good girl. I actually wished I would have recorded the first time that I did leash guidance with her downwards, because what I realized is that when I trained her for commands, I didn't actually use leash pressure, or at least she is definitely not familiar with it as I expect her to be. So when I first started applying leash pressure downwards using my foot, she was kind of panicking a bit, trying to figure out what to do with the pressure. She was like moving back and forth. She was like, what is going on and what is going on? And it might look kind of frantic because she might be panicking a little bit. But as you give it time, they start to learn and figure things out for their own, where the moment they start moving downwards, that pressure immediately starts to subside. And then they learn that once they complete the command, all of the pressure goes away. So in the beginning, it's definitely not gonna look this smooth where she immediately knows, oh, this is what they're asking for. They're gonna take a couple tries to figure it out. So during training, always just be calm. You don't have to say many words in the beginning. You just let them figure things out. Because remember, we are trying to give them the directional guidance for what we're asking for. During this process, there isn't necessarily a lot of words that need to be said. All right. Good girl. All right, come on. Good. Good girl. Good. Again. Good. Good job. So remember, dog training is all about repetition, about patience, and something that I really want to emphasize that I see a lot of owners tend to make the mistake of doing is when you are waiting for them to figure things out, if you see them starting to move in a direction that is actually towards your goal, so if you see them starting to move forward a little bit, sometimes you can move the treat forward a little bit so that their paws move forward all the way so that they go into the down. But be careful about how fast you move the treat, because if you do it too abruptly, then it might throw them off completely and they walk up. They stand up instead of completing the down. So make your movements slow and definitely make them deliberate. Okay. Oh, nice job. Ready? No? Ready? Woo, good girl. Good girl. Good. Good. I'm going to throw it higher. Good. Nice. Good. Yes, good girl. All right, we done.